Training.com, CWI prep course. Come visit us at our website at train-eng.com, pronounced training. This is our CWI prep course. This is as you go through some of these videos, these will be some snippets or samples out of our online training course. If you like what you see here in the sample section, come and visit us and take the course. Our CWI CWE online Part A video course, $149. It's self-study CWI exam. Everything's an online video course. CWI prep course, personal protective equipment, eyes and face, module 2, part 5. Learning objectives for this module. We're going to talk about eye and face protection, radiant energy, filter lenses for welding, personal protective equipment, helmets and shields, and generally keeping yourself safe by using PPE during the welding inspection process and while you're in a shop in general where there's a lot of welding taking place.
Eye and face protection. The document that covers eye and face protection is ANSI publication Z87.1, Practice for Occupational and Educational Eye and Face Protection, latest edition. Scope. This standard sets forth criteria related to description, general requirements, testing, marking, selection, care, and use of protectors to minimize or prevent injuries from such hazards as impact, non-ionizing radiation, and chemical-type injuries in occupational and educational environments, including but not limited to machinery operations, material welding and cutting, chemical handling, and assembly operations. So this document, Z87.1, it covers, eye protection and face protection, which are very important things. You don't want to come home with a chunk of iron stuck in your face or missing an eye. These are things that we in the first world, U.S., Canada, and Western Europe take for granted, but these are very important things. Eye protection. You can't just cut the bottoms off a couple of Coke bottles and throw them in a leather strap and call it safety glasses. That's probably better than nothing if you're working somewhere in the developing world. But here in the U.S. and in Canada, this is a very important thing. So we need to be cognizant that this document exists, and it is the governing document for eye and face protection. Here are some pretty standard examples of eye, ear, face, and head protection. Pretty self-explanatory. Everybody knows what all this stuff is, but it's very important part of our toolkit. You don't want to be somewhere watching somebody weld and not have the right shade of lens, or not have safety glasses on when somebody's grinding, or not have hearing protection or in place when there's excessive noise levels. So radiant energy. Electromagnetic energy given off by an arc or flame can injure workers' eyes and is commonly referred to as radiant energy or light radiation. For protection from radiant energy, workers must use personal protective equipment such as safety glasses, goggles, welding helmets, or welding face shields. This equipment must have filter lenses with a shade number that provides the appropriate level of protection. A shade number indicates the intensity of light radiation that is allowed to pass through a filter lens to one's eye. Therefore, the higher the shade number, the darker the filter, and the less light radiation that will pass through the lens. Electric arcs, as well as gas flames, produce ultraviolet and infrared rays which have a harmful effect on the eyes and skin upon continued or repeated exposure. The usual effect of ultraviolet radiation is to sunburn the surface of the eye, which is painful and disabling but generally temporary. Ultraviolet radiation may also produce the same effects on the skin as severe sunburn. Exposure of the skin and eyes to the arc is the same as exposure to the sun. Anybody that's ever had a good flash burn on their eyes or done something stupid like welding without long sleeve shirt on knows what a sunburn is. Especially a really fun one, and I'm being facetious here, sarcastic. A really wonderful thing is when you TIG weld with just gloves on and you are an idiot and don't wear the long sleeve shirt and you get sunburned on the bottom of your arms, a part of your arm that never sees any exposure to the sun. That's a burn that really hurts. So that's why we're talking about safety and wearing protective clothing and PPE is to not have that happen to somebody. Radiant energy continued. The production of ultraviolet radiation doubles when gas-shielded arc welding is performed. Infrared radiation has the effect of heating the tissue with which it comes in contact. Therefore, if the heat is not sufficient to cause an ordinary thermal burn, the exposure is minimal. Leather and wool clothing is preferable to cotton clothing during gas-shielded arc welding. Cotton clothing disintegrates in a day or couple weeks, presumably because of the high ultraviolet radiation from the arc welding and cutting. So leather and wool are your preferred materials of clothing when welding. And there's a reason that welding supply places sell a lot of leather. It's not due to being a fashion statement, although it does look cool. But leather takes a beating a lot better than cotton. So does wool. Don't wear synthetics. Don't wear polyesters or something that's made of an oil or a petroleum product. That's not a good thing. Those things are very flammable. Here we have a sample of a filter lens protection for shielded metal arc welding. You can see the electrode size and then the amps and then the OSHA minimum protective shade number, and then you can see the ANSI AWS shade number. So the OSHA minimum for, let's say, 332 to 532 electrode is an 8. ANSI and AWS says the minimum you should use is a 10. So whatever the OSHA minimum is, ANSI and AWS, their recommendation is a couple higher. So just be cognizant that if you have questions about whether or not you or somebody you know is using the proper protection as far as a filter lens for different types of arc welding, there's charts out there produced by OSHA and ANSI that will give you the proper number of the protective shade that you need to use for arc welding operations. Here's an individual that's outfitted and ready to go to weld. Personal protective equipment, sturdy boots, clean clothing, wool is best, treated cotton is acceptable, no synthetics, pants without cuffs. The reason you don't want cuffs on your pants is because something will catch in there and catch them on fire. Pants outside the boot, because if a spark lands on your pants, you don't want it rolling the burning material or liquid metal into the inside of your boot. You want flaps on your shirt pockets, cap, gloves, and leathers. Personal protective equipment. General. The electric arc is a very powerful source of light, including visible, ultraviolet, and infrared radiation. Protective clothing and equipment must be worn during all welding operations. During all oxyacetylene welding and cutting processes, operators must use safety goggles to protect the eyes from heat, glare, and flying fragments of hot metals. During all electric welding processes, operators must use safety goggles and a hand shield or a helmet equipped with a suitable filter glass to protect against the intense ultraviolet radiation and infrared rays. When others are in the vicinity of the arc welding processes, the area must be screened so that the electric arc cannot be seen either directly or by reflection from glass or metal. We've looked at this slide before, but I'm just going to throw this in and kind of tell a little story here too. Hopefully it doesn't get too long-winded. years ago, I was training a guy to try and weld. We needed welders. He was a forklift operator, had welded in college, blah, 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 or welded in high school, I guess. Had some, and I thought, oh, he might make it. So anyways, I give him a welding hood and some leathers, and I'm like, you can practice. Here's the MIG welding machines. If you use this area, you can practice after work, see if we can get you to pass a test plate. Well, I come into work on Monday morning, maybe it's a Tuesday, whatever day of the week, and one of the welders is like, you gots to see your boy. Go take a look at your boy. You gots to see your boy. So I go to talk to him. This guy that's was trying to pass the weld test, or, practicing to get so he could take the test. And instead of using the full face shield, the hood, he had taken the lens out of the arc welding hood, the face shield, the full face shield, and put it in a set of cutting goggles like the ones on the right here, the little red ones. So the lens will fit in there. He put the lens in there. It didn't affect his eyes, but he was welding, and he looked like a raccoon. His face was just burnt to a crisp. It looked like he had laid on the beach in Miami, Florida for a week straight and just gotten cooked. His face was cooked and blistered, and I'm like, dude, why did you do that? And he tells me, oh, the face shield was too heavy. It just bugged me. And I'm like, dude, do you think there's a reason every other welder on the planet, maybe not planet, every other welder that does arc welding in the United States wears this one, and they don't put a really dark lens in a pair of cutting goggles? It's because the radiation will cook your skin. You don't want to be doing this. Well, anyways, that's my rant on ear, eye, face, and head protection. But little anecdote there for you that just when you think you've seen it all, somebody does something that's so far beyond what you had expectations of stupidity to be. So, but anyways, even though those dark lenses will fit in a pair of oxy-fuel cutting goggles, don't put them in there for arc welding. Those are, there's a reason that people wear the full face shield. Welding arcs are intensely brilliant lights. They contain a proportion of ultraviolet light which may cause eye damage. For this reason, the arc should never be viewed with the naked eye within a distance of 50 feet, 15.2 meters. The brilliance and exact spectrum, and therefore the danger of the light, depends on the welding process, the metals in the arc atmosphere, the arc length, and the welding current. Basically, don't look at the arc unless you've got the appropriate eye protection in place, which is a shaded lens, and you need to look and see that you've got the proper lens for the proper job, for the type of arc welding and amperage and voltage that you're utilizing. Helmets and shields. Continued. Operators and fitters and those working nearby need protection against arc radiation. The intensity of the light of the arc increases with the increasing current and arc voltage. Arc radiation, like all light radiation, decreases with the square of the distance. Those processes that produce smoke surrounding the arc have a less bright arc since the smoke acts as a filter. The spectrum of the welding arc is similar to that of the sun. Exposure of the skin and eyes to the arc is the same as exposure to the sun.
We covered eye and face protection. We talked about radiant energy, filter lenses for welding, a lot of different shades of filter lenses utilized in welding and cutting and materials joining. We talked about personal protective equipment, clothing, helmets, and shields. All of these are very important to the welding inspector. And if you're going to be out in the shop, you got to dress appropriately from a safety standpoint so that you don't get injured or get sunburned or flash burned or incur some other type of injury. Unlike a lot of other programs, we've got it set up so that you can do it a la carte. If you only need to, we've got different parts of the CWI course broken out. So if you don't need to sit through and take safe practices for welding inspectors, or you have some strengths that you know of and you want to streamline the process and only hit the sections where you don't really have a strong background or a great deal of proficiency, our program is set up so you can take some of these parts of the CWI online course a la carte. Pick and choose, put together what you want. Leave the rest, like a Chinese food buffet. We've got one section where it's questions, questions, and more questions. We've got a whole number of CWI self-study question bank, $40. Come on in, take it, take a look, see. If you just need questions, if you sat through another course and you just want to keep hitting the material, check out our question bank, $40.